Well, we have a staircase here. Is this the first step or the last step? That all depends upon where you're going.
Looks about 12 steps, maybe
Uh,
14, 15 steps.
got a bunch of steps, but it's always good to start at the beginning.
I love the beginning. I hate the treachery of specialness, though.
I hate the word too, and I hate what it is, but we need to understand it. So let's do that. Comparison must be an ego device, for love makes no comparisons. Specialness always makes comparisons. Comparison is established by a lack seen in another and maintained by searching for lack and keeping clear in sight all lacks that comparison can perceive. This lack in another does comparison seek, and this lack in another comparison looks upon. Oh, and this lack in another comparison looks upon, and always whom comparison would
Diminish.
thus diminishes would be your savior. Read that, Lee.
And always whom something, there's a real word there. Dang it.
And always whom
It's it. And always whom it thus diminishes would be your savior, had you not chosen to make of him a tiny measure of your specialness instead.
Sometimes doing what Tom Wakechild has done for this book is incredibly wonderful. 98% of the time it's perfect. This particular one,
99.5, I'd say. This one is just it's hard because you don't want to change the original text.
well, it's
You
trying to
want to
make
tell the people what it is. It is a comparison. But you don't think of a comparison as a subject or a noun typically.
right,
So
exactly. So it gets kind of funny after a while, but we figure it out if we go back to the pronoun.
I
That's
think, yeah, it's important to know that you got to roll with this. It's like surfing something, but
sure.
that is one of the things that I saw this morning with the people that have gone back to Jesus. In other words, the people that have been born again that were studying this before, and now they're looking at it. Now they're looking at it from a dualistic standpoint. All right, the Bible is easy. It's easy to argue that the Bible looks at the world from a dualistic standpoint. But you can read the Bible, not taking it literally, and read it in a non-dualistic way. If you read the Bible in a non-dualistic way, then A Course in Miracles, Advanced Christianity, all of it makes perfect sense. But if you don't, and you accept that dualistic thinking and that that there's a God and there's a devil, if you accept that that's the way the real world is, that's what we call the small reality. Fundamentalist Christians would argue that we're going the opposite of the truth. So there's definitely a distinction. We're saying that hell's on earth and that the smaller reality is the real hell, that there's only one God and it's only love, and there is no devil. It's just the absence of God. All right, I got off on a
Well, that's okay. And just actually, my take on what you're saying is they both have validity. There are things in the Bible, all of the stories of all the great people, who every one of them had faults that wrecked their lives in some cases. Why Moses did not get
lots of great examples on how to live in this dualistic area and still try and choose the right thing and the moral thing to do.
right. This gives us a different viewpoint of the world from the one that the Bible does. And if this one gets you closer and to becoming one with God, then this is the one you should be working with. If the Bible gets you closer to feeling one with God, then it's the Bible. But there's a lot of misunderstandings in the Bible because a lot of it is historically placed. So let's get back to what this book is teaching us.
All right, let me read sentence 5 and then you can pick it back up again, okay?
Yes.
All right. And always whom it thus diminishes would be your Savior, had you not chosen to make of him a tiny measure of your specialness instead.
Against the littleness you see in your brother Savior, who you choose to compare and judge, you stand as tall and stately, clean and honest, pure and unsullied, by comparison with what you see, which you perceive to be your brother's lack. Nor do you understand nor do you understand it is yourself that you diminish thus, perceiving yourselves as lacking. I would say that I think that this Course in Miracles is more like the master's course for the college course using the Bible for the same study material.
It allows you to see the non-dualistic view of the Bible much more clearly, and the non-dualistic view of Jesus's teachings much more clearly. And maybe it just took the rise of the idea of clarifying non-dualism to get to the point where there would be a vocabulary for Jesus to be able to impart the wisdom that he was trying to.
Well, and as I came into this from having been Jewish, raised Jewish, the whole idea of Jesus was a little bit of a stumbling block for a while, but I found Jesus' teachings the best in the Bible. Here, the idea that he is dictating this has continued to be one of the most important and prominent reasons that I cling to this, because it's like giving him a chance to make a mid-course correction in his teachings, because some of his earlier ones didn't come through quite as well and as universal. And
Yeah.
he's doing a better job now.
Yeah.
That's what I see.
It's definitely, I feel like there's a clear bead, a line to draw of where, if you feel you have to accept that there's a devil in the world telling you to do something, an external power that is forcing you to do something that you don't want to do, if sinning is possible, if all of those kinds of things, they're wrapped up in the mind control aspects of the church, the population control aspects of the church, not Jesus's teachings. And one of the things that this lady was talking about when she was saying, being a born again New Ager, was that the consistency of the Bible, that the Bible has been consistent for 2,000 years. Scribes were very, very good at transcribing something in order to keep it consistent. The Bible is 99.5%, I don't know, consistent. I think that she had a specific example. One of the books, there were only two small changes, a transliteration of a number and a name that was spelled differently. And other than that, it was unchanged since 1200.
2000.
Since like the 300 or 400s.
The third century is when.
Okay.
Fourth century, was when the I think it was Constantine.
Bottom line is ACIM has changed a bunch as it goes through the Ur text, the original text, the third edition, and now the fourth edition, and here's Tom's edition. And the point is that the underlying ideas are what's important, not the details that change from edition to edition, because really the consistency here is that it was filtered through Helen Schuckman's brain. What we're reading is filtered through her brain. So it's seen from the perspective of a psychologist, a person who was, raised by Jewish parents, a person who was having difficulty getting along with a lot of other people, and then all of a sudden they got on the same team, going in the same direction, and they produced this, her and Bill. So I almost feel like we almost need to restart this one today, but I'm going to pick up reading the note. Hopefully that will make clear the very first paragraph, and maybe we start it all over again tomorrow and we redo it, but who knows?
Well, we can just leave this as an extra, it's a footnote share or whatever. It's just talking about this stuff. I think it's probably, I think there were some other people who might be listening to it and said, well, wait a minute, let me tell you the way I think about it. And I hope they tell us.
Well, that sounds like a great deal too. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read the text. I'm going to read the literal text. I'm going to do my best to scroll and keep the what I'm saying on the same page. And then I'm going to pick up reading, and then we can go on like normal after that.
Okay.
All right. The treachery of specialness. Comparison must be an ego device, for love makes no comparisons at all. Specialness always makes comparisons. It's established by a lack seen in another and maintained by searching for and keeping clear in sight all lacks it can perceive. This does not
Oh,
seek.
I'm just helping you scroll.
Oh, thanks. This does not seek, and this it looks upon, and always whom it thus diminishes would be your Savior, had you not chosen to make of him a tiny measure of your specialness instead. Against the littleness you see in him, you stand as tall and stately, clean
Oh,
and honest, pure and unsullied by comparison with what you see. Nor do you understand it's yourself that you diminish thus.
it's interesting because your version that you just read is much shorter
Much shorter.
than
Much
this
shorter.
because of all the extra words they
And
put in.
so I say thank you, Tom.
Okay.
Thank you for
Well,
putting the extra words in there for me.
as you said, most of the time it's terrific clarity that he's adding to it. But even then, it's important for us to remember that it's still his viewpoint. And
Yep.
everybody has to find their own viewpoint.
Yep.
That's key. And that
But
layer that
unless
you
you know that person, it's hard to pull the viewpoint out of the word what they're saying. So that dichotomy of reading this in the small r reality, but interpreting it from the big R reality is really important. Comparison forms the basis for our judgment. Unfortunately, our comparison is based on our misperceptions rather than on the truth of the vision of Christ. Coming out of the egoic thought system, we look for lack and thus only accept perceptions that are in alignment with our predetermined beliefs and judgments. That's super important. We haven't said that recently. But it's our predetermined beliefs that are played back in front of us that we're really battling against. Since ideas never leave their source, by perceiving our brother as lacking, we confirm that we must also be lacking. Thus, comparisons only diminish both parties and remove them further from the truth of their joint oneness.
pursuit of specialness is always at the cost of peace to us. We can attack his Savior and cut him down, yet recognize his Savior's strong support. Who can attack? I need a new lesson in reading, Lee. Sometimes it's funny, and I think there are different reasons that I make these errors. Who can attack his Savior and cut him down, yet recognize his Savior's strong support? Who can detract from his Savior's omnipotence, yet share his Savior's power? And who can use your Savior as a gauge of littleness and be released from limits? You have a function in salvation, Lee. The pursuit of your function in God's plan for salvation will bring you joy, but the pursuit of specialness must bring you pain. You can highlight number 6 and 7. I'm going to read that again because I love it. The pursuit of your function in God's plan for salvation, whatever that is, will bring you joy, but the pursuit of specialness must bring you pain. Here, in the pursuit of specialness, is a goal that would defeat salvation and thus run counter to the will of God. To value specialness is to esteem an alien will to which illusions of yourself are dearer than the the truth.
When we pursue specialness over God's will, we are choosing for the egoic desire to be right instead of happy. God's will is that we be happy. Specialness requires that we see ourselves as limited and different. When we choose to see inequity, we are choosing.
Inequality.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, when we choose to see inequality, we are choosing the egoic thought system over the truth of the one self.
I just had a funny thought. This morning, you and I both have made quite a display of reading incorrectly. And it would be easy to project that you, whoever is listening to this, say, boy, these guys can't read. I think I just need to read it myself. Watch out, because if you think you're special, I hope you have learned it from this, that it's sometimes these words look like something else for a reason that may be deep down. Specialness is the idea of sin made real. Sin is impossible even to imagine without specialness as sin's base. For sin arose from specialness out of nothingness. Specialness is an evil flower with no roots at all. Here in the specialness' sin is the self-made egoic savior, the egoic creator who creates unlike the Father and which made God's Son like to the egoic concept of the little s self and not like unto God the Father. Egoic special sons are many, never one, each one in exile from himself, and God of whom the special sons are a part, instead of the real God. Nor do egoic special sons love the oneness which created them as one with God the special. The egoic special sons chose their specialness instead of heaven and instead of peace, and wrapped their specialness carefully in sin to keep their specialness safe from truth of their oneness with God. I paused for a long time in that previous sentence because the word narcissism comes to mind. Without getting into psychology, which Lee, my son, knows a lot more about than I do, it seems like that's the problem, and as many of us know, that can be a big problem in dealing with someone like that. He is special or she is special, and it's all okay with them. But they're not seeking to be one with God and the rest of the family. They have to be special. Okay, back to you, Lee.
Well, we raise our kids and hope they feel special and hope they
Yes.
feel unique and hope that they feel, and there's a difference between special and unique, where you're a facet, where you're a perspective into something versus you being the one person who can do something that nobody else can do. And just because you can do something nobody else can do doesn't mean that there won't be 40 people 20 years from now who can do the same thing. The things that are special and interesting and new, especially when it's an idea that gets spread, a new way of doing something that's more efficient, this is where we see the reflections of truth in our dualistic world. And it's difficult to kind of say one thing is special versus, oh, this is a new idea and a new way of looking at something and a new perspective. And that really might be closer to the truth.
Well, it's funny because even in what you just said to us, you said, especially when, and that puts that at the top. But there's another thing.
It can only be special in time, though,
Yes,
in the in the dimension.
absolutely. And here's another example to separate the meanings, because it's the meaning that we're studying here, not the word itself. Because in some cases, it clarifies things. For example, I think that there was, I once heard a tape by an alcoholic who said, I really don't have a problem. My case is different. That was his favorite.
Yep, my case is
Uh,
different.
and by doing that, he takes himself out of the mainstream that probably would help him, the mainstream idea. And he says, well, I'm different here. Right? Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that, and therefore I don't have to do this or that, or I can do this and or that you can't do. And that gets them in trouble. So a lot of it has to do with the meaning of that and when it's used and the context. That's something you always talk about, Lee.
That's not how I remember my case is different. I remember my case is different as being, he would say my case is different, and then he would say something that every single person has done.
Yeah.
Except in his mind, he would be like, I'm unique and I'm special. Look at my case is different. And then he would say something that I drank and got drunk. I drank and fell down the stairs. He'd say something that every single other alcoholic in the room had already done. And it would make him laugh because he would say, my case is different. When we really are all the same, going through the same pain, going through the same struggle, through the same strife. And
And
if
we
you
all
keep it
think
to
we're
12
special.
steps, that those fundamentals, you can say they're true for every alcoholic. Because we're also stupid animals to the degree that we need 12 stupid steps to help us get from the bottom to the top.
Yep. And that's really just one flight.
One flight.
As we started the first picture on this tape, on this group here,
Yeah, this tape we're making, Dad. Thanks.
I know, old fashioned. I'm sorry, Lee. I'll try and catch up to you.
Here we are, live on YouTube.
And here we are. Back to you, Lee. Number 14. Note
Sin
14.
is the belief in lack. Specialness is sin's cornerstone, since specialness is based on comparison and judgment that arise from perceived differences. Comparison is judgment based on the misperception of lack in another. Comparison, specialness, and sin keep the sonship shrouded under the veil of illusion. In other words, comparison, specialness, and sin keep the commonalities that we all share shrouded under the veil of illusion.
Everybody under that veil says, my case is different.
Yeah. The
They all
ego
stay under the
tells
veil.
us. Yeah, the ego tells us that the body is our special home that no one else can enter. Our body symbolizes our belief in specialness and our denial of the truth.
I think that the way this particular, and I won't say the word tape, the way this particular YouTube evolved might be the best thing that we can offer other people, because we're all struggling to understand the real meaning of these things. And to just read it by itself, it helps. But I think that sometimes you have to struggle to parse and get the real meaning out of something. And if we can be an example, and you may be listening and got it the first time and we didn't get it yet.
Fully for you, then.
Yeah, exactly. So I I had fun doing it with you, Lee. This is the way we had been doing it, and we're sharing it now, and I hope there are other people who like it.
I think one of the ironic things is that to truly understand non dualism, it takes multiple perspectives. It takes the perspective of the student and the teacher. It takes the perspective of a teacher walking with a student side by side. It takes the perspective of allowing Jesus to come through you so that you can help the other person get clarity in something that in turn gives you clarity. And without really picking this stuff apart and studying it and trying to apply it in a number of different ways from a number of different perspectives from a number of different points in a lifetime, we get a deeper understanding of the truth that's behind the words. to try and take something like this at face value is like trying to imagine what the inside of a watermelon looks like when you've never cut one open and seen it. You only see the outside green. You can't imagine it be full of this red, beautiful, sweet, delicious fruit.
And it's the same thing as the six blind men trying to figure out what an elephant is.
Yep. Yep. 6 blind men. To 6? I thought it was
One
3
blind
blind.
man, look, no, yeah, six blind men. One man says when he's holding on to a leg, this is a trunk.
Right.
He says it's a whip when he's holding the tail. When
Yeah.
he's holding the ear, it's a canvas.
Yeah.
When he's holding the trunk, it's a water hose. And I missed one or two, but that's the idea.
Good enough.
Yeah. Each one gets a different idea because he only has his point of view. The idea, the really goal would be to get, as you're saying, different perspectives, or another way of saying it, different points of view. Different points of view, if you can assimilate them in your own mind, then you can get closer to what's really there than any other way. Why are you laughing?
I'm imagining the if it's 6 blind men and then one guy that can see, the guy that can see is sitting up on top of the elephant and he says, "By God, it's a pachyderm."
That's right. And he says, let's go. And he rides off into the sunset on his pachyderm.